Welcome, friends. Today we have Marsha Quinlan with us. Welcome.
Thank you.
She is licensed professional counselor and works with people with infertility, women, and couples. Welcome, Marsha.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you. So our main goal today is to raise awareness about psychological aspects of what people who are experiencing infertility, what they go through, and for other providers, other people, relatives, family, how could they be supportive and not unintentionally trigger those who are experiencing infertility.
Yes.
So, Marsha, do you want to start with what are the common psychological pains and experiences that you see?
Yeah. So infertility, it's a very complex issue to deal with because there are tremendous losses attached to infertility often. I always think of it as like the journey of losses because by the time people come to me, they're seeking help and they need support and they have been through a lot of failed cycles, sometimes a lot of miscarriage. So with that, you see depression, you see anxiety, you see adjustment disorder, you see post-traumatic stress disorder, which a lot of people don't think of. But you know, someone can get post-traumatic stress disorder from a doctor coming into a room and saying, you all can't have children on your own. And then forever, you know, those words kind of ring with that person. Nightmares, sleeplessness, panic attacks, a lot. Yeah.
So the range is quite wide. There is a sense of loss of the ideal object or that what we would have fantasized or thought we will have in life or kids, and coming to terms with that, as well as underlying like dread or fear, and if somebody went through miscarriage, that grief and loss there as well.
And helplessness. And you had said, you know, a lot of times with infertility, you have this expectation that you get married and you have a baby and it's the most natural thing ever. And then when someone says it's not going to look like that for you, it can often shake the foundation of someone's self-identity. And so you have to go back to who are you at the core of, you know, outside of the label of mom or dad, who are you at the core of who you're meant to be on this earth without that title.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So that is profound in a way. Looking at our self, our identity, even our purpose maybe differently. People who are working or who come across or in contact with women or couples dealing with infertility, what are common triggering points that you learn from your clients who wish that other people were more sensitive to those particular triggers?
Yeah. So, you know, I wish we could always know what would trigger someone when it comes to infertility, but it is so unique to each person. You know, so I've even been in sessions with someone and unintentionally triggered someone. It's what we do when someone is triggered that matters. Like I made a comment that she had a very cute baby bump, and for her, she wants to have a big baby bump and she wants to be ready to have the baby. And so she started crying in session. And so we got to process that my intention would never be to cause you harm, and helping her to be able to educate her family and friends on what she needs from them and what is hurtful to her. Because most people's intentions are good. They don't ever want to hurt someone. But there are some common ones that try to avoid at all cost, like telling someone to relax. If you just relax, this will happen for you. Or
just because now somebody said you could relax.
Yes. Or sending someone, you know, a bunch of try this, try that. When you know, when a person is on the road of infertility, they've tried everything. So asking the person beforehand, before you give advice, say, I learned something today. Would you be interested in hearing what it is with regard to infertility? And if the person says no, then we respect that. Some other triggers, like going into a store that has baby clothes or a baby department, songs on the radio, movies, pregnant women, seeing a pregnant woman, someone in your family getting pregnant, one of your friends getting pregnant, baby showers. Everyone's different and the triggers are different. So I think the most important part is really checking in with the person and saying, I want to be a person who supports you and never one to hurt you. So what do you need from me to best support you on this journey?
That is so powerful. Just like you did for that woman. I didn't mean to hurt you. And you acknowledged that pain. And I think on the other extreme, sometimes we could be so paralyzed that we don't say anything.
Yes.
And that could come across as the person didn't even care.
You're absolutely right about that. That our loved ones think that they're protecting us. If I bring it up, they're going to start crying. If I bring it up, they're going to be in pain. So I'm just going to sit back over here and I won't say a word, which isn't always what that person needs.
Instead of silence or instead of being insensitive, probably express with kindness and sensitivity and be open to that feedback that might come across. And if you unintentionally triggered, rather than being defensive, just ask for that forgiveness or clarify your intention, but don't just stay silent.
Absolutely.
What would you say for other providers, relatives?
So for providers, so the medical team around someone who's going through infertility is the lifeline through this process. And they're already overwhelmed and they have tons of patients, but they really are the lifeline, even before the family, because this person is walking the path with them. This person is saying, this is what we can do moving forward. This is what we can't do. They're doing the blood work. They're checking them in. So the secretaries, the nurses, the doctors become the lifeline, the ones who get it. So it's super important that they understand that, and that they understand that this is a population, which they do, that has no control over the biggest thing that they want control over. And so it very often comes off in very irritating ways, like constant emails or constant need for reassurance, which can be really frustrating for the medical staff. But to understand that there's a reason that people are that way. They're trying to grasp onto whatever kind of control that they can. So for providers, I think having an understanding of that and maybe being more proactive with like communicating, with checking in, with following up, like that is something that really gets hard for some of the patients that I work with, is I need answers and I want them now. So I think it would be helpful for patients to have as much control as they possibly can when it comes to their treatment plan, how they're told information. So I know if I was on the medical side of it, I would want to meet with patients ahead of time and say, how is it that you want to hear news that you're not expecting? Would you prefer it in an email? Would you prefer it with you and your partner in an appointment? To give them as much control over that as possible.
So how is it that you would like to hear news that you might not like, or a result that you might not be looking forward to? So they're in control. And
it can be the same for good news. Let's talk about both and what would be most comfortable for you. So that for doctors, for nurses, for secretaries that work in the medical facilities with these patients, I think that's really, really important. And then with family and friends, there's a lot. I think the most important part, like we talked about, is checking in to say, what is it you need from me? And I'm here for you, and I am thinking about you. And then checking in every couple weeks, because we can change. One person can say they need this, and it is that way for a week, and then all of a sudden it changes to something else. So constantly I'm just checking in. Is there anything you need from me that we haven't talked about? So I think that's really important. Not offering advice, which families they want to fix. When you have someone who's hurting, you want to make it better, and you can't when it comes to this. So listening, supporting, talking to people that have gone through it. And with friends and family, it often brings up our own issues too. So it might bring up issues for the grandparents. It might bring up issues related to culture. It might bring up issues to a sibling, and so those people getting their own support too, and not, avoiding having to talk to their loved one because it's too painful or brings up too much of their own stuff.
That's where also your earlier point for understanding from the standpoint of somebody's very own identity is challenged. They're looking at themselves in such a painful way that either for providers who feel like somebody's reaching out too much, or for friends or family, sometimes there could also be more shame. There's stigma about some people, some relatives, particularly commonly heard from in-laws side. There are all sorts of stigmas and pressures. How do we address that stigma?
Yeah, and there is a lot. And, the only way we can address it is to talk about it, and to talk about it a lot. I read this article like 2 weeks ago. It wasn't really an article. It was more of a short piece from a Black doctor talking about, and her name is Dr. Lori Johnson. And she was talking about infertility trauma and racial trauma, and how in her Black community, she did not feel like there was an understanding of her infertility, which would be a whole nother interview to talk about. And in her infertility community, she didn't feel like she got support and understanding of being a Black person going through this. So the only way we can talk about these larger cultural biases, injustices, is to really know that they're there and talk about them a lot.
Also I know in my culture or South East Asia, people don't talk about it. There is the shame or opening up is stopped, so healing doesn't happen. And for the person who is experiencing immense amount of inner pressure, externally there is not only there's lack of validation and empathy, is in a way there is torture emotionally.
Absolutely. And trying to find then, which you would hope it would be written into the culture to make it easier, but then sometimes we have to really seek out and find people who we can go there and talk about it with, even if some of our closest loved ones won't.
So talking about it and accepting the reality, or that grieving the loss of ideal future in that case. Now, in your experience, what are you think like a direction, particularly for somebody who doesn't has means to get support from somebody like you? What would be some things or resources or ideas that they could implement on their own?
So I would look within that person's social network and, think of social gatherings and who have you met that kind of might get it or might be someone you might be able to talk to. And even though it will be really uncomfortable, you send them an email or you reach out to them and you say, this is really hard for me, and would you be someone that I could talk to about this? Someone that, hopefully there's someone in the network that you could do that with. If not, there are always therapists. And now there's therapy online, which makes it even easier if you're in an area where it's really hard to get support. It's much easier now. And support groups. So social media, everyone has their opinion about what that is, but one of the great things about social media is there's a ton of support groups. On Facebook, I don't know about Instagram as much, but definitely on Facebook. And there's online supports. If you Google search, you know, what kind of resources are in my area for infertility, that's a good place to start.
Rather than staying alone, and even that one other person who is experiencing the same pain that we are could be a powerful connection and support. Of course, if you can access the professional help, that would be ideal. Have you seen this trend where many couples are opting not to have babies, and so probably tapping into, even though maybe someone didn't start that way, but now accepting that reality, if it is because of one or the other reason they can't have the baby, maybe looking at how are other people who are opting this route, what kind of things they're doing to accept the new identity or new possibilities of the future.
Yeah.
Give a lot of meaning and purpose.
Yep.
Is adopting helpful, like fostering, adopting other kids for them?
Yes, absolutely. You know, and so that's why I think of it as the journey of losses, is because sometimes, and I've worked with people for years going through this journey, and so they have the loss of, you no longer can get pregnant. They have the loss of, we no longer can carry any of your embryos with a gestational carrier. Then you have, now I'm mourning the loss of ever having my own biological children, and I now have to transition to think about what it might look like to adopt. Or some people, adopt without going through any of the infertility procedures. Some people adopt if they're just told, you're going to have to do IVF. But yes, adoption is an amazing option. And, I always say when you get your baby, no matter how you get your baby, whatever path gets you to your baby, if you choose that I'm going to keep doing this, it will happen, and you will not care. You will look at your baby and you will say, yeah, don't even have to think about that stuff anymore,
Absolutely.
But it's getting to that point.
Absolutely. So that is so helpful. And anything else for today's message?
For people in America, I would say checking out Resolve, which is like the National Infertility Association, and they have a lot of good resources on there. ASRM, American Society for Reproductive Medicine, is another really good source to get good information and find providers that specialize in infertility.
Awesome. And we'll also put those links in the description below. And of course, make sure to share the message with others and subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much, Marsha. It was so lovely to learn more from you.
Thank you for having me.